Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. So fun seeing all the attendees pop in, seeing that list grow. It is wonderful to see you guys. Really excited. We've got a lot we're going to cover in this hour, so buckle up. Grab a pen, paper, whatever you might need. If you want to jot some notes, I'm very much a kinesthetic learner. I like to write things down. So if that's you, make sure you have something available. We're going to move pretty quickly through it. We got a lot we're going to cover, but I think it's going to be really helpful. We've worked with, gosh, at this point, hundreds of people taking the exam to get them prepped. So this is all of our learnings through that time. So really excited to share those. Awesome. I see people still popping in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. As people come in, you can get settled. Again, make sure you've got some water and a pen, paper, anything you need to jot down notes. And let's get going. So welcome. This is No Tricks, All Treats, our NBC-HWC exam prep hour. I'm super excited to bring this to you guys today. I am Ashlee Honeycutt. I am the Director of Health Coaching Operations here at YourCoach Health, as well as the Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach. I teach continuing education courses, and I have the pleasure of working with thousands of coaches through YourCoach. So if you, skipping ahead. And for you, those of you that we have not met yet, it's my pleasure to introduce you to YourCoach Health. We are the only operator for behavior change powered by health and wellness. Our industry partners entrust us to stand up or augment their health coaching operations utilizing our APIs, widgets, and our tech-augmented army of validated and credentialed health coaches to surround their existing product or service. We're the premier virtual home for health and wellness coaching, an ecosystem built to empower health coaches while expanding access to their services through our industry partnerships. So for our coaches like you, this enables us to work within a HIPAA-compliant platform, which is tailor-made for health and wellness coaches by a health and wellness coach. Our platform is designed to give you everything that you need to run your practice smoothly. Think things from HIPAA-compliant chat and video sessions to session notes, a comprehensive library of resources, a food diary, all that plus contracting opportunities with us for coaching with our industry partners for our verified and validated coaches practicing on our platform. At YourCoach, our mission, which I absolutely love, I was jumping ahead because I really love talking about this, but our mission is to create a world where every individual has access to a health coach by 2030. So in short, to help create more happy and healthy humans, which is what we're all here to do. And that's why we're sitting for the exam, right? We want to help people through behavior change. So let's dive into what we need to know for the exam, because it is a lot, right? We're going to cover a couple of different aspects of this. Just a reminder, we're going to cover a lot in the hour, no doubt, but it's not everything that you need to know. It would be foolish of us to think we could fit all of that into an hour. But this is good news because it means that the good news is you had to be part of a robust coaching program to issue that certificate to even be able to sit for the exam. You already know everything you need to know for the exam. But we're going to touch on some of those content pieces that are common on the exam that coaches sometimes feel challenged with. So if you find that to be an easy review, fantastic. It means you're already familiar with it. You're comfortable with it. You can check that box and just get that mark of confidence. If you feel like as we go through, it's something you're not as comfortable with, that's okay too. You still have time. So it just means it's time to buckle down and study that a little bit more. And then I would argue, perhaps even more importantly, we're going to cover the prometric experience. So what to expect. Just we want to set you up so that your nerves can be calm. You feel prepared walking in for the exam. You know what to expect. And then we're going to cover the test structure and test taking strategies. In my experience working again with hundreds of coaches that have taken this exam, so much of the difference between success and falling short on the exam revolves around knowing some of these test taking strategies. So we all learn basically the same material going in, and I've yet to meet a coach who didn't study or didn't try, right? So we just need to understand how that test is structured and then some skills and strategies to help us navigate it. And of course, we're going to end with a few practice questions together where we're going to go over how we would work through that question and then how to select the best answer using some clues and some of our strategies. All right, so let's start with the prometric experience. So first, if we talk about just confirming, rescheduling, or canceling, So you're going to be asked to confirm your appointment approximately a week before your exam appointment. So while you can reschedule your appointment to another date within the exam window, you have to change it 31 days or more before the first day of your scheduled test date to avoid that appointment change fee. So what that means is, given where we are in the calendar, you're locked in at this point. Your test date is your test date. And if you don't test as scheduled, you're not going to be permitted to reschedule. So let's work through a bunch of strategies to make sure you're set up for success on that test date. When that test date comes, you need to bring a hard copy of your scheduling permit. Yes, you can use an electronic copy at most Prometric places. However, having that hard copy is just going to save you in case you can't get Wi-Fi in the building, in case something goes wrong and it doesn't pull up. It's nice to have the convenience of that hard copy. You'll also need to bring an unexpired government-issued form of identification. Your name needs to match exactly to the scheduling permit. So you can have a few acceptable variations, like variations in capitalization, presence of a middle name or a middle initial, a suffix on one document but not on the other, like junior or senior. And also the name on your ID has to appear in the Latin alphabet, so common English languages, English letters. So if you have any deviations there, then you want to reach out immediately to Prometric to get those resolved before you go in for your test. Also, bring water. It's going to be 4.5 hours. You're going to be there potentially for this exam. You're going to want some water. So it's important too to note here that some testing locations, and actually I would argue most of them, will not allow you to bring it in with you while you're testing. From what I've heard, a lot of them don't, but they do have lockers that you can store them in, and then you can get a drink at your break times, which will map out what that looks like as well. Also, as you're setting yourself up for success on that day, a couple of tips: just map out the testing center, give yourself plenty of time to arrive, take into consideration traffic, time of day. If it's rush hour, give yourself extra time. Really revisit that strategy to put your brain and body in the best test taking shape. So what's your normal routine? What helps you to feel your best? Get a workout in if you can. Moving your body, especially activities that cross your midline, this middle line running down your body, is really helpful because when we cross the midline, we force both sides of our brains to work together. And that's going to help things like higher order thinking skills, sensory integration, body awareness, and our critical thinking skills, all things that we really want going into that exam. And of course, prepare any necessary food or snacks that you might want for the exam. Again, you're not going to be able to take these in when you do the exam, but you can access them on your break. And arrange for any childcare or logistics needed for exam day, and have a backup plan, because you wouldn't believe how many things just conspires and doesn't go our way on exam day. So have a backup plan in case things go awry. Also, just a few notes of interest that I think can be helpful. You won't be the only one in there taking an exam. It won't be just the NBC-HWC exam being given. You may see RNs, you may see architecture students. All different variety of tests will be proctored at that same time for various organizations. You may be asked to remove your shoes, your glasses, your hoodies, all for inspection before you go in. So I know for some people that was, just know that that is likely to happen. They're going to ask you to remove those to make sure there's nothing up your sleeve or hidden inside a hat or anything like that. You may not be permitted to wear the hoodie or the hat inside, depending. So just kind of be aware of that, which means it can be helpful to dress in layers, either with, a cardigan or a jacket of some kind and a short sleeve shirt underneath, because it can be a variety of temperatures in there. It may be really cold, it may be warm, just depending on where you are. With that, there's also most likely going to be unknown distractions. For example, when I took the test, there was somebody sitting behind me who kicked their chair the whole time. And so you just hear that clunk, clunk, clunk. So just be prepared for unknown distractions. You can bring earplugs if you want. They have to be foam earplugs. They can't have strings on them, and they can't be headphones or anything with Bluetooth capability. So just know that. And also, they're going to give you a small whiteboard to write on. Consider that for writing out your biometrics at the beginning. We're going to talk more on that later. You can also use it to keep track of questions you want to refer back to. So you can also flag these electronically. You're going to be able to highlight and strike through answers on the computer. To do all of that, though, you're going to want to make sure your test window is fully expanded on the monitor. So if it's minimized at all, you may not see those options. So just make sure that they're expanded. All right, let's talk about the actual structure itself. So again, arrive 30 minutes prior to your exam time, plenty of time for parking, plenty of time for any delays that you encounter in traffic. It's going to give you time to check in for your test in case there's a wait. They're also going to give you personal item storage. You can put everything in the locker, wallet, purse, snacks, water, all that kind of stuff. And some allowed items, you can bring in Bluetooth glasses. Again, they're going to inspect those before you go in. But if you're someone who gets headaches or finds it difficult to sit on the computer screen for a couple of hours at a time, that can be helpful. Again, no headphones or AirPods, but you can bring the foam earplugs with no strings. It's important. You can also bring a pillow or lumbar support. So just note that anything that has external communication capabilities, wireless, cellular, Bluetooth, anything like that is going to require pre-authorization before test day. Now, for the format of the exam, like we talked about, it's a 4.5-hour test session. There's 150 questions in multiple choice format. And you have 15 minutes before the test to go over the tutorials. This is going to walk you through how to highlight questions, how to mark them, to return them, all of those things. You have 2 sections that are an hour and 52 minutes each. This works out to about 1.5 minutes per question. So it's not unreasonable, but we do need to be efficient as we make our way through them. And then we have a 15-minute break between those 2 sections. You can opt out of this break, you can shorten the break, but you cannot go over 15 minutes or your time starts ticking on your next section. So it's also worth noting that once you complete a section, you cannot go back to it. So once you finish that first section, go on break, you can't go back to it. And then you have a 15-minute post-test survey after that. And then you'll see over on the right there just how the questions are structured. So you have roughly 25 or 35 questions around coaching structure, 70 to 80 questions around the coaching process, 25 to 35 questions around health and wellness. That's going to be your biometrics. And then 10 to 20 questions around ethics and legal. All right, let's get into the actual test taking strategies. These are the pieces that I feel like is so helpful for a lot of us. This exam is very different than what we've taken in the past. A lot of times exams have one right answer and a bunch of wrong ones. This one, we're looking for the best answer. That means there could be multiple ones that are right. They're just not the best answer. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit. So one strategy we can use is to organize, understand, and memorize. The brain is most effective at absorbing information with shorter, regularly scheduled study sessions. So think an hour or less, even 20 minutes a day is great. It's better than doing 3 or 4 hours in a day. You can only memorize, retain, and apply what you actually understand. And this test is so much about understanding and engaging with the materials. Memorization is not going to be enough. So a tool you can use is pretend that you have to teach a kindergarten class the material. Could you do it? Could you break it down and teach it to a kindergartner in a way that they understand? If not, it may be worth revisiting that topic and gaining a deeper understanding. And also the technique of teaching someone else moves us from that simple act of storing the information on our mind to constructing the knowledge for ourselves, and it leverages the power of knowledge retrieval, which is amazing. The process of retrieving information and teaching it to another person improves our understanding and increases recall. It takes that passive learning piece and turns it into an active process. It's really what solidifies it in our brain. So that brings us to that retrieval practice idea, and how we engage with our study materials is going to make a huge difference in the outcomes and our success on the test. So research demonstrates continually that we have to take that active role in engaging with our material and not just passively absorb it. So reading the books is great, but it's not going to be enough. We need to internalize it, and we need to really strengthen that retrieval piece. So struggling to recall something from memory actually helps us to improve that memory and retention. So it's okay if you're doing practice exams and you don't know the answer. It's actually going to help you improve by having to struggle to recall it. And then if we go and we find the right answer and have to justify why it's the right answer, that can move us from just identifying the gaps to then filling in that gap in our knowledge. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. So one is really simple. Just break out a blank sheet of paper, write down everything you remember about the topic, check yourself, and then add in any forgotten parts or things that you left out in a different color. This is a big hint. The kinesthetic act of writing not only helps you to retain information easier, but if you write it in red pen, it's been shown to increase retention even more. So fun science fact for the day. You can also create flashcards to quiz yourself. You can draw a web or a concept map from memory based on what you know about the topic. Come up with fun acronyms or mnemonic devices or songs to retain the information, however you learn best. I actually heard a really great one for what's included in metabolic syndrome. I think this one's really good. It's WT, like weight, and then LBS for pounds. So weight pounds, but abbreviated, WT LBS. And so the stands for, the W is high waist circumference, T is high triglycerides, L is low HDL, the B is for high blood pressure, and the S is for high blood sugar. So it's a neat little mnemonic device to help remember that. And then, of course, we can review the study method. So what strategies are most effective? How are you feeling about the materials you've studied for so far? Now is the time to really reflect on that and make any changes that you need to make, because you're in the home stretch. And then brain power. So setting your brain up to perform at its best is really going to be helpful when you show up, and that makes you prepared and ready for the exam. So check your routine, your exercise, nutrition, your sleep. Are they all on point to best prepare you for exam day? Actually, research from the University of British Columbia reports that exercising in the 48 hours preceding an exam results in better performance on the exam than not exercising at all. Also, ensuring quality sleep the night before can boost performance on the exam. I think we all knew that one. We need a good night's sleep, right? So as you're kind of considering and mulling around how to set your brain up for success, you may think about caffeine. Does caffeine help you or hinder you? So what does that mean for the morning of the exam? What do you need to get quality sleep for the week of the exam? Are there changes you need to make? What choices and timing of food and hydration is going to help you be settled for the 4+ hour exam? While water is great and hydration is good, you're going to be challenged if you drink a whole gallon of water and go into an exam where you have to sit there for an hour and 52 minutes at a time, right? So you want to consider those things. You can get up and go to the bathroom. However, the time that you are away going to the restroom does come out of your test time. So, you want to think about that. What do you need nutrition-wise to feel alert, calm, focused? What mindfulness or breathing techniques do you have in your back pocket that you're ready to use before or during the exam? Are there any logistical challenges that need to be solved? Do you have to be home at a certain time? Do you have to share cars with someone? Is there childcare to consider? Is someone going to be calling you with an emergency during the exam? Are you the point of contact for someone? Can you put someone else there for that time? So lots of little things to think through. And also quiz yourself. Quiz yourself on all the material so far. Never commit to an answer without ruling out the other choices. It's going to make sure you're not jumping for a distractor. Lots of questions are going to have a distractor answer. It's how multiple choice exams are set up. So you really want to make sure you're ruling out choices as well as not just choosing one. So once you rule out a choice, you can then completely forget about it. It's not taking up brain space anymore. You can focus your attention on comparing the remaining choices, which brings us to some good multiple choice test taking strategies. First one would be skip ahead and read the question first. It's okay to skip ahead in the question. We want to know and recognize what we're looking for in the text. A lot of these questions are going to be case studies. They're going to be a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, some are even 3 paragraphs. It's a lot of information. So it helps us to know what we're looking for before we start reading it. It's really going to allow you to be efficient, because remember, we only have about 1.5 minutes per question. Some are going to go super quick, but some of the lengthier ones are going to take more time, right? Read the question first, and then read everything carefully. Our brains really desire efficiency and speed. It's how we're built. So it will try to take as much data in as quickly as possible and quickly jump to conclusions for the answer. So we're going to have to work around that. We need to take our time to read every word, pay careful attention to the question that's being asked. So oftentimes they're going to give you a lot of unnecessary information in the case study or the paragraph before the question. So it really helps, again, to know what that question is before we sit and we dive into it. Because if it's asking us about lifestyle factors, but yet it's giving us a bunch of biometric markers, we don't need that taking up space in our brain, right? We can read through that, but we don't need to retain it. So it's helpful to look at that question. And then as we read it, look for specific words. Think things like best, not, all of the above, none of the above, never, always. These are going to be really good clues to helping us select the answer. And then don't look at the list of potential answers until you've come up with your own conclusion to the question. Read every answer to find that one that aligns with your initial answer in your mind. Remember, your gut instinct is going to be really strong. You've gone through a program to look at all this material. You've been studying this material. You know what the answer is. Don't be distracted by other answers. So if you come up to your own conclusion first, it's a lot easier to select the right one. If you're not sure about the answers, maybe it's one that's stumping you a little bit, eliminate answers. Then we can choose the best answer from the remaining options. So multiple choice tests, just by design, are as much about knowing the right answer as being able to rule out the wrong answers. So we can also use this process of elimination to our advantage. And sometimes you may arrive at the right answer only because you are able to rule out all the other choices. And finally, answer every question, even if you have to guess. So really keep time management in mind here. Don't spend too much time on any one question. Although you should have enough time, remember you have about 1.5 minutes per question. Make sure you take a guess, even if you aren't sure at the answer. You do not get penalized for trying to answer a question. But if you don't answer the question, it's automatically wrong. You can also write that question number on your whiteboard to revisit it, or you can flag it electronically, whatever your preference is, so that you can return back to that question if you have time. The worst thing you could do is spend a ridiculous amount of time, 5, 6, 7 minutes on this one question that you're not sure about and may get wrong, and miss a bunch of easy ones that you would have gotten right because you ran out of time. Now, if you're going to guess, a few things, let's make sure we're doing it intelligently. So one, rule out as many wrong choices as possible, right? That's our obvious first tool. If there are multiple answers that are equivalent and then one that's different, then it's likely the equivalent group is all wrong together. So that's a little tip and trick for multiple choice tests. Now, if you have two answers that are opposite of each other, the answer is likely one of those. Ignore the other choices. And again, these are tools that if you truly have to guess, that can help you narrow it down and still make the best choice, even if you don't know the material. Always choose the one that is client focused and client driven. At the end of the day, coaching, the client always has the answer, right? So make sure whatever answer it is truly client focused and client driven. That's going to help you rule some out. And then finally, don't go for something you've never heard of until you rule out all the other options. So there's a saying actually in diagnostic medicine, when you hear hoofbeats, don't look for zebras. Now, that means that something, and of course, they're referring to a clinical diagnosis here, but that if a diagnosis begins with the simplest, most likely answer, and then we proceed in a methodical way from there, and only after eliminating those obvious answers should we then probe for something more rare or unlikely. So even though we're not a clinical service and we're not diagnostic medicine, the advice still applies. Don't go chasing zebras. Look for the obvious things first. I do see a question in the chat from Caroline about the running timer for every question. There is not a running timer for every question. It is just a totality for that hour and 52. So you can split that up between questions however you need to. Great question. And then time management for sessions. So this is something you're going to want to know. Again, you don't really have to drill down into the specifics, but a general idea is good here. So know the coaching session, know that about 40% is generative moments. So this is that curiosity and exploration with the client. It's a good reminder that a session is client driven and not the coach's agenda, right? Goals take up another 47% of this. Again, another great representation of coaching, letting the client explore their motivation, their priorities, and then turning them into goals and then having that accountability. It is worth noting the coaching psychology manual says that arguably the most important moment of a coaching session is the minute right before it starts. That minute determines how the coach shows up to the session and can really impact how that session goes. So again, you don't need to necessarily know exact, percentages and minutes here, but it's good to have a relative idea of how a session is made up. So let's talk a little bit more about generative moments. So at their best, generative moments are going to spark that intuitive dance of coaching and require the use of every coaching skill and tool dynamically in the moment. So what does that look like? It's always the question. So first, radiate compassion. Safety and a strong sense of support are preconditions for success in all coaching sessions. Express empathy. Empathy is going to use both emotional and cognitive awareness to connect with and give voice to what clients are feeling, what they need, what they're desiring. We use mindful listening, helping break free from that autopilot that sometimes we get stuck in, requires presence. It requires us to maintain a trust building and growth promoting relationship. We can use evocative inquiry. So the more coaches navigate with an open-minded curiosity, especially when it comes to a client's strengths and capabilities, the more clients are going to be open to discovering about themselves and where they may want to go. And that's really important for a generative moment. Not only do they need to feel safe in this space, but we need to have a curiosity to help our clients have curiosity. Open-ended inquiry. That's going to be inquiry that invokes or evokes curiosity. It's going to evoke stories and images, and it's going to have far more power to generate that upward spiral than an inquiry that's just looking for short analytical answers. So, that tell me about a time, that's going to be a story instead of how old were you when, or what was the result when you did A, right? We really want to make those stories complete. Perceptive reflections are another one. This one really is, I think, an area sometimes as coaches we get stuck in, because if we ask too many questions in a row, even if they're great questions, it can make the session feel a bit like an interrogation, and it compromises that generative moment, because the minute that clients start to feel like we're just firing questions at them, it takes away from their sense of ownership in the session, from their ability to tell their story, and then it also makes them feel like, man, I don't have any say in where this is going, right? I'm just getting a lot of questions. So they even hear what I'm saying. So it's going to bring us to reflections, right? There's got to be a balance there. But those reflections really show engagement with the coach and that connection to the client. We also need to honor silence. Silence is a beautiful tool. It's one maybe we're not always comfortable with, but it's a wonderful, and especially in response to empathy, inquiries, reflections, it really gives clients a place to pause, to think, to feel, to connect with their truth, to connect with their thoughts in their heart in that moment. Creative brainstorming can be another one. So brainstorming, of course, is really important to coaching, especially in these generative moments. So that increased motivation to change comes increased interest in specific change strategies. And we need to think through all those great ideas that clients have. Also unfailing affirmation. So steadfast acknowledgement of the client's capabilities, their characteristics, their strengths for change. That's all going to boost that client self-efficacy, self-compassion. We really, the exam, need to know these skills, know what they stand for, and why we use them. How do they show up in a coaching conversation? What does it look like to express empathy? Of course, that's us, sitting with the client and acknowledging the challenges, the struggles, being alongside them. What does it look like to have open-ended inquiry? We're going to talk more about this one a little bit, but do you know what it looks like in a coaching session? Which brings us to 3 core coaching skills. One is mindful listening. This is active listening, right? And perhaps arguably the most important of all of the coaching skills. This is where you really build that trust and that rapport with the client. It improves the quality of the conversation between the coach and the client, and it's listening that brings full non-judgmental awareness of what the client is saying in the present moment, and it's a hallmark of great coaching. I once heard, "Listen until I don't exist," is a great motto for great coaches. Now, active listening requires at least 2 different types. You have cognitive listening. That's where we listen to the facts. That's the easy part, right? We can always listen to the facts of what someone is saying, but effective listening is where we're listening to the feelings and needs behind the facts. So this is listening to those things that are unsaid, but maybe they're implied or they're hinted at. This is a really important note for the exam. Be careful of assumptions and questions and answers on the test. If you have to make assumptions, the question, that answer will be wrong. They will give you all of the information you need to find the answer. And we're going to look at what that looks like later. But if you have to make logical, even logical leaps and assumptions, just know that the answer is probably going to be wrong, because they're going to give you everything you need. Another core coaching skill is open-ended inquiry. So this is where we're going to elicit long narrative answers. What and how are often used to begin open-ended questions. As a matter of fact, on the exam, if an answer starts with why as a question, go ahead, scratch it off, because The minute we start asking why, we're starting to introduce judgment into the space, and that is not going to be something we want to do in coaching. So look for questions that start with what and how, cross off the ones that start with why. By taking time to really evoke and listen through these open-ended inquiries, then we can reflect genuine interest in the client's experiences and aspirations. Again, this is also going to help us stray from assumptions. And then we have perceptive reflections. This is just another form of listening. It enables clients to hear what they're saying from the vantage point of another person. It's more transformational than inquiry because it causes clients to connect more deeply to their emotions and truth of the matter. Matter of fact, the prefrontal cortex answers questions. It's going to be that logical, analytical part of our brain. But when coaches perceptively paraphrase something back to the client, clients react with a deeper, more emotional response that's generated from the limbic region of the brain. And that's where emotions, rewards, and pleasure are regulated. So that reflection piece is really important. So let's dive into some different types of reflections. I know you guys have all heard of these before, but you want to know your reflections. You want to know what the different types are. Why do we use them? And what do they look like? Because you will get questions around these. This is important. First one is amplified reflections. So these are going to maximize or minimize what the client is saying in order to evoke disagreement from them in the direction of change talk. Word of caution here, be very careful with these. Any hint of sarcasm or judgment is going to make these appear really snarky and come off the wrong way. And I think you have to know yourself as well to know if you can pull off an amplified reflection. They can be really impactful to encouraging the client to argue less, and they can elicit the other side of a client's ambivalence, but you really have to know when and how to use these. So an example is a client may say, I'm here because my doctor told me. And a coach could respond, that's the only reason that you're here. Now, that could be read, that's the only reason that you're here, right? Like we can introduce that sarcasm or that snarkiness to it. And on the test, if you can read that statement and make it easily sound sarcastic, it's probably an amplified reflection. Also, we have double-sided reflections. So these reflections are going to be like images seen in a trifold mirror. They're going to reveal multiple perspectives at the same time and reflect both sides of a client's ambivalence. And they can help express that ambivalence and then explore it. So a client could say something like, I know I shouldn't drink alcohol every night, but it helps me reduce stress at the end. So the coach could reflect that back. On the one hand, drinking alcohol at night helps you wind down. And on the other hand, you are concerned about the health effects of drinking alcohol regularly. Now, it's helpful here. You will see double-sided reflections that use but as the conjunction. Personally, my preference is always to use and instead of but because it highlights that ambivalence, giving equal credence to both sections of it. And when we use but, it's a bit like an eraser. Like I'm sure a lot of us have heard, anything that comes before but just gets erased. And it diminishes what's gone before in that double-sided reflection. It's kind of like saying, never mind what I just told you. Here comes the important information. So for that reason, I prefer and personally, but you will probably see it as and or but in the exam. So just know it's showing two different sides of an argument. We also have shifted focus reflections. These are like the images we see in a periscope. So they're going to redirect our attention away from a resistance-provoking subject in order to focus on another area. So they're going to provide an understanding for the client's situation. They're going to diffuse discord, and it's going to help you move that conversation forward. So a client may say, I can never find time to drink water. It's just too hard. Coach in a shifted focus reflection would say, this sounds like quite a challenge. I remember you telling me how healthy you ate in college and exercised and you even drank water. Tell me about that time in your life. So we're moving away from that, that resistance and moving into this area of, oh yeah, you told me about this time things went really well. So let's talk about that. And then we have simple reflections. Now, again, there are other types of reflections you will run across. You're going to want to know them, but these are probably the ones I feel like get the most questions, or we've seen the most questions around. So simple reflection is just that. It's just restating what the clients are saying, using their own words. You're not exaggerating, you're not interpreting, there's no distortion, you're just parroting it back to them. So if the client says, I really want to start taking my medicine again, say, it's important to you to take your medicine again. Be careful with these in an actual coaching relationship, because they're simply restating what the client said and they don't add anything. It can make you sound like a parrot. So they have a place, but you definitely want to move to using other types of reflections that are more complex. So again, know the types of reflections, why they're important, and when they're best used with a client. You're going to see questions around reflections and examples of them on the test and asking you what kind of reflection. So you really want to be able to translate those. You can actually write out reflections for each of these in your own tone, and that's going to help you to understand these even better. Let's talk about the 5D cycle of appreciative inquiry. First step is to define. Starts with securing what the client wants to learn, their topic, and how they want to learn it, their method. So it's important that you imagine your change goal, not an outcome goal. How are you going to change, not what is going to change? So this stage, you can get clear on the topic by asking, what is the challenge? And consider, what do they want to change? What do you want to see, hear, feel, or do more of? Getting clear on that topic creates that structure for appropriate conversations about what they want to accomplish moving forward. So first one is define. We have to know what we're even talking about, right? Let's define what it looks like. Then we're going to discover. So this is all about self-awareness. This is about understanding. It's about identifying processes in their life that work well. So what's happening when they're at their best? So we want them to reflect on their stories of strength, their best practices, so that we can build that confidence. We build that momentum that's going to unleash higher levels of presence and performance. What are their successes? Once we know these things, then we can begin to build on it, and we're going to reframe any deficits into assets. Confidence at this stage. And it's also going to help us uncover core values. So really, what's that life-giving experience? What are the core values? What are generative conditions? What are those heartfelt wishes that energize the client to learn and express new ways of being in the world, right? So this is going to be an opportunity to touch their heart and their spirit, connect to meaningful memories, touch on what matters most to them. We're going to build a relationship here. So change hinges on relationships. So we need to create a state of connection through shared understanding and dreaming, right? Which is going to come up next, hint, but we're in that discovery. This is also a place for reframing the experience and taking perspectives. And often discover is viewed as the most important phase of the coaching session. This is the generative moment, guys. This is what that 40% of generative moment sits in, is this discovery place. And then we move into dream. So this is where we shift to what might be. So we're encouraging left and right brain activities. This is where we start talking about making dreams come true and making them come alive. So think about things like, what is their life's calling? What possibilities generate excitement? And this is where we can really lean into image inspires action. So they need to begin to create their future by imagining in vivid detail what it looks like, right? They can use stories, narratives, images, and metaphors, all to help that dream come alive. They're going to give themselves permission to dream. And this can be tough because it requires some bravery. It requires some vulnerability, and it opens floodgates for what could be. So this can be a very emotional stage as well. But dreaming pulls us forward. It gives us some optimism, some hope, some motivation. And when clients are dreaming, it's encouraging them to imagine what the details look like. So we can even dive into, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What words are they saying? How does this impact others around them? When is that? Actually, this reminds me, so J.K. Rowling, most of you know, is the author for Harry Potter, said new worlds are important, but you can't just describe them. Give us the stories that make up the universe. And that's really this dream cycle. It's all about giving yourself the stories that make up the future world. Now, it's important to remember the client finds the answers. Every time the client finds the answers, we don't. We just ask the questions, and we help them craft this dream. Then we move on to design. So design is about prioritizing and planning processes that work well for the client. So this is where they're going to make a personalized plan for how they're going to live their future. It's that step that turns the map into reality, right? They prioritize what they want, they put their energy and resources behind it, they identify what support and research they need, and they explore obstacles and barriers that can get in their way. So this is going to be an area where we start looking at what would it take to move from where you are right now to where you want to be. If you can improve on where you are today by 5%, what are 3 different steps you think it would take to get there, right? We're starting to map this out and see what it looks like. And then we move into destiny. So once we know what they want to focus on, the best of what that is, they imagine what it could be, the work becomes actually living it. This is the hard part, right? And Brene Brown defines a practice as a conscious choice of how we want to live. The implementation of the design is going to be an ongoing process. They're going to come back to this cycle again and again, and they're going to dream more, and they're going to design it, and it's going to become the destiny, and we're going to see a lot of this cycle. Remember, massive goals don't require massive action. They require consistent action. And that's where this design and destiny piece really come in. And appreciative inquiry overall really requires a mix of analytical and creative activities. SMART goals aren't enough. A purely analytical approach is going to fail if it's not supplemented by a process that engages the client's heart and it stirs their imagination. We need to be connected to our motivation to do something. So the 5D cycle of that appreciative inquiry is going to be where we tie the heart in with those SMART goals to understand that why behind it and what our driving force is. And it's a really neat tool to have in your toolbox. Again, on the exam, you're going to see questions about maybe what stage of appreciative inquiry, the cycle that a client is in. So you want to understand what that looks like and why we have each stage. All right, expressing empathy. So empathy is such a huge part of the coaching relationship. Again, I think we all understand empathy pretty well. It's respectful understanding of another person's experience, including their feelings, needs, and desires. So a couple of things to note, especially when it comes to empathy on the exam: make observations, not evaluations. So this is to limit descriptions to the 5 senses, and this is going to stave off that tendency to judge, exaggerate, interpret, generalize, catastrophize, assume, or even criticize the client. It's going to be huge when you're parsing answers on the exam. So an example of that is an evaluation would be, I failed to journal last week like I wanted. An observation would be, I journaled 1 time last week. So you see, it's something that is very concrete. It's an observation made on experiences. We want to stick to that, not to evaluations of what was done. Express feelings, not thoughts. So thoughts can masquerade as feelings, and they're not useful in expressing empathy. If you can substitute I feel or I think, and the phrase still works, it's a thought, not an emotion. An example would be, a thought would be, nothing is going to change, but the emotion is, I feel frustrated. Identify needs, not strategies. So this is going to be one. A strategy would be like, I need you to copy me in every email. And the universal need behind that is, I need some transparency and authenticity. Also make requests and not demands. So requests are invitations for the other person to meet our needs, but only if it is in a conflict with their own needs. We can make it specific, spell out those concrete behaviors, and say what you want versus what you don't want. So a demand could look like, I request you be more respectful. What is respect to that person? What does that even mean? The request is, I request that you arrive at our meeting on time. And that gives that concrete step. So again, on the exam, when we're looking at things, we want to avoid generalities. That I request you be more respectful, because what does that even mean? We want to look for a specific request. All right, let's look at stages of change. And I do see some questions coming in the Q&A and in the chat. We'll definitely get to those at the end, so hang tight. Knowing the stages of change is really important. Pay special attention to for each stage and timelines for change. So that's going to help you immensely in the test, because those are typical clues that you'll see. So let's start at pre-contemplation. I won't or I can't. If the statement starts with either one of those, they're probably in pre-contemplation, right? Also, they have no intent to change the behavior in the next 6 months. A lot of times they're going to give you that time frame. So you'll know I won't or I can't, or not changing in 6 months. That's how we know they're in pre-contemplation. This is that ignorance is bliss stage. So I can't start working out regularly. Pre-contemplation, right? Our goals for this one is to validate their lack of readiness to change. You know, the decision is yours. This is your life. We can encourage self-exploration, but we're not pushing action at this point. Contemplation is going to start maybe with I may. I'm thinking about it. Like, I may want to do this. And they're expressing intent to change maybe in the next 6 months, but not quite yet. So again, change in 6 months, I may. Sleep schedule's all messed up. I'm tired all the time. I can't keep this up, but I can't quit this week. That's our contemplation phase, right? So again, we want to work on decisional balance, pros and cons of change, pros and cons of staying the same. We may be looking at resources here. And then we'll move into preparation. This is where I will. This is where we start to see those statements. The person intends to take a step forward within the next month, that next 30-ish days. So I will in action in the next 30 days. That's what we need to know about preparation phase. It's our window of opportunity. They're ready to test the waters. It's going to be, I bought some decaf tea to drink during my night shift instead of coffee. Okay, we're preparing to take action, right? Then we move into the action stage. I am. Client has taken active steps to change. Behavior is lasted for less than 6 months. So they're actively in change. I am doing this. And the behavior is less than 6 months in action. So for the last few weeks, I've been trading out 1 cup of for 1 cup of decaf tea during my night shift. Okay, we've taken action, but it's recent. And then we move into maintenance. I still am. So this is where the action has been going on for longer than 6 months. I've been caffeine free since January and I love my decaf peppermint tea, right? They've been doing this for a while. Timeline is important, right? So we're all paying attention to the timeline. I can't drive that home enough. The timeline is going to be your clue for stages of change. Know it, love it. And then of course we have relapse. In a coaching scenario, this is where we want to show grace. Relapse is completely normal. The cycle is not always cyclical. It doesn't just go in a circle. It can crisscross and jump around and go anywhere. We just want to look for those markers, that timeline, and those little hints of I can't, I may, I will, I am. Those are going to help us to decide what stage they're in. And of course, the Travis Illness Wellness Continuum. This is a concept that really helps us understand and visualize the different stages of health that we can clients do. So it's a big spectrum. It's a line that goes from one end to the other. So on one end here on the right-hand side, we have wellness. This is where we feel our absolute best. Physically, mentally, emotionally, we have lots of energy. We're in a good mood. We can do all the things we want to do. It's like you're at the peak of your game, right? This is thriving. On the other end, we have illness. This is where you're not feeling well. It could be because of physical sickness. It could be because you're feeling down, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed. In this state, you are not at your best. And it can be tough to do the things you want to do. So in the middle here is this neutral point. This neutral point is where there's no discernible illness or wellness. I'm surviving, but I'm not thriving. Like I'm getting through, I can do the things that I want to do, but I'm not thriving at it. Like I'm just kind of making my way through the day. So we can move back and forth. We're not stuck at one end or the other. We can move along the spectrum at any time. Health and well-being is very dynamic. It changes. It's not just about being sick or healthy. There's so many needs in between, and that's what this really highlights for us. So we absolutely have control over where we are on the spectrum, and that's where coaching comes in, right? We can make choices that push us more towards that wellness end. So things like eating a balanced diet, exercising, managing stress, getting enough sleep, all things that can move us in that direction. Know the Travis Illness Wellness Continuum. Know it, love it. Also be familiar with scope of practice. So of course you can find a full scope of practice on the NBC-HWC website, but here's some helpful clues to know when a client may need to be referred out. So it could be things like decline in the ability to experience pleasure or increases in sadness, hopelessness, helplessness, intrusive thoughts or unable to concentrate and focus, unable to get enough sleep or awakening during the night. We've got a whole list here. It's important to remember out of all of these things, it doesn't mean that you can't work with the client anymore. It means that they may need additional support from another professional or a clinician. So it can be an and, not an or. It is important to know, though, that within our coaching conversations, we have to be clear about what we can support them in and what we cannot, right? So they need to work with the clinician for the areas that are outside of our scope that would be within theirs, but we can continue to implement those plans from the clinician, and we can continue to support them in areas that we are allowed to within our scope. Also, ethics. Big ones here, conflict of interest. This is where your private or personal interests can influence the objectiveness of our role and our responsibility. So an example of this is selling products that you recommend to a client. That would be a conflict of interest. There's also handling of records. So making sure that you maintain, store, and dispose of any records, including electronic files and communications that are created during coaching. This is going to promote confidentiality, security, and privacy, complies with all of the applicable laws, regulations, and agreements. We're going to talk a little bit more on that. But side note, you're fully HIPAA compliant. So if you're using YourCoach, you're going to be just fine on this. And also have a clear agreement about conditions under which confidentiality may not be maintained. So if someone's engaging in an illegal activity pursuant to valid court orders or subpoena, imminent or likely danger to themselves or to others, then that may be somewhere where we need to say, where I believe these conditions may be applicable, I may need to inform appropriate authorities, right? And then just a few little summary points I'm going to put up here. I won't read these all out loud to you, but it's really important to remember clients' self-directed goals, behavioral changes that align with their vision. Make it client-centered and client-directed. That's your biggest clue for being in scope. Support is always going to be informed. If they have any recommendations from their clinical team, that's always going to trump anything else, right? We want to work with them to implement those plans. And then always disclose a dual role. So if you're selling supplements, if you're a personal trainer as well, if you're a dietitian as well, anything like that, you need to disclose that to your client and make it abundantly clear which hat you're wearing when. This one I think throws a lot of people for a loop, so I wanted to make sure to touch on it. This is the HIPAA privacy rule, and that deals primarily with the privacy of patient information and how it can be used and disclosed. And then we have the HIPAA security rule, which focuses on the security of electronic health information. So both rules are important. They're essential for maintaining the confidentiality and integrity of health data, but they're different. And we need to know the difference because everybody I've heard from has had a question about this on their exam. So the privacy rule is related to the disclosure of patient data or client data in our case, since we're not clinical, whereas the security rule is focused on actual IT protocols. So think things like passwords, encryption, all of those IT practices put in place to safeguard the data. So privacy is all data, right? All of that patient information. Security rule is going to be around IT protocols. So you're going to want to know the difference in those. And biometrics. This is such a hot topic. When we asked for what people wanted to cover, this one came up quite a lot. We're not going to go through all the biometrics because we'd be here. This would be a whole hour session in and of itself. But there's two that have recently changed that do have a lot of questions from examinees. So let's look at those. First one is blood pressure. These are the numbers taken directly from the CDC website. I double checked them yesterday, so they are the most current. These are the 2017 guidelines. They're shared by the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association. So let's look at these a little bit to understand them. Normal is going to be where that systolic is less than 120 over 80, which is our diastolic. Elevate, only the top number, that systolic changes. All of a sudden it's 120 to 129 is elevated, but that bottom number, the diastolic, is still less than 80. And then we have high blood pressure, which is hypertension, which is where the systolic, the top number, is over 130. Diastolic, the bottom, is over 80. So this is a change from previously. So you want to make sure that you're working off of the 2017 guidelines. Again, you can find this directly on the CDC site. Also, let's look at cholesterol. This was a change, again, rather recently. So within, I think, about the last year. So this, again, is directly from the CDC. I checked these yesterday, so this is the most up-to-date. Notice the recent change here that came, and it's around optimal cholesterol levels. So you have optimal cholesterol, where the total cholesterol is about 150. The triglycerides are less than 150. And we have HDL, which is our good cholesterol, the happy cholesterol, HDL for happy, at least 40 milligrams in men and 50 in women. So know the difference between men and women. And as you study your biometrics, pay close attention to the signs. So is it greater than or greater than equal to? So make sure when you're studying your biometric sheets that hopefully you got from your school, you'll want to pay attention to that. And then that LDL, the bad cholesterol, it's about 100. Now, here's where it changes, right? So if you're an adult or a child, high cholesterol is having a total cholesterol above 200. So the condition's also called hyperlipid. Oh my goodness, hyperlipidemia. Oh, full little word there. I shouldn't say little, it's a big word. But you're going to want to know that 200. That's where it turns into that high cholesterol. The others are optimal cholesterol levels. And the rest. There's a ton of biometrics that we want to know. We're not going to go over them, like I said, but you do need to study them too. And when you get to your station with Prometric, they're going to supply you with a whiteboard. It's, roughly the size of a sheet of paper. And it can be really helpful to write down all of that biometric information so you have it ready, and you can, as you go through and you're reading case studies and the numbers are starting to jumble and you've been through so many words and so many numbers, it's nice to have it all on a sheet that you can just refer to, so it's not taking up brain space, so you can concentrate on other things. Also, numbers start to melt together as you get in there, like an hour in. So that can be helpful to jot them all out. Also not on here, but you'll want to study the social determinants of health and the Healthy People 2030 framework. So that's really large. You don't need to know every single piece of it, because I think there's like 300 and something points to the Healthy People 2030 framework, but know the generalities, know the direction of it, know those social determinants of health. It's not vastly different than the one from 2020. They actually have on their website a section that lists the differences and what they updated, but be familiar with that as well. And then let's look at some practice questions together, just so we make sure we understand how to use those test-taking strategies in practice. So here's the first one. A 52-year-old male client decides to work with a health coach to take steps towards a healthier lifestyle. Upon filling out the initial questionnaire and his first intake session with a health coach, the following is learned about the client through their health risk assessment. Current blood pressure is 145/95. He has a BMI of 24.8. He currently walks 30 to 40 minutes at least 3 times per week. His diet is typically meat, potatoes, and a few vegetables, and is often low in refined sugar, although he does go out for wings and a few beers to socialize 2 to 3 times per week. He doesn't smoke, and his family history has been consistent with many with hypertension after age 40. So then we get to our question. Which of the following lifestyle factors are most concerning with his risk of hypertension? So before we get into the answers, if we had read the question first, we would know we were looking for lifestyle factors. We wouldn't have had to be parsing through and trying to determine all of these biometrics and where they fell and if they were concerning, because it doesn't matter. They want lifestyle factors, right? So we know we can zero in on that. We can also look at phrases in the question: most concerning, hypertension, and the lifestyle factors, right? Those are our biggest clues. So given that, we're going to look specifically for answers that are around lifestyle factors. Now we probably all know lifestyle factors for hypertension, right? But let's look at the answers. So we've got A, age, family history, diet, alcohol consumption. We've got B, C, D, and E. I'll let you read those. But as we go through them, what can we eliminate? Let's start by doing that. Well, we can eliminate A because age and family history, not lifestyle factors, right? Cross that one off. B, family history is not a lifestyle factor. Cross that one off. C, family history, again, not a lifestyle factor. Cross it off. So that leaves us with D and E. Well, E, age is not a lifestyle factor anyway. Cross that off. Well, now we're left with D. So based on that, even if we didn't know diet or alcohol consumption were lifestyle factors for hypertension, we could correctly guess the answer, which is D. So pay special attention to those key phrases and to reading those exam questions. Let's look at one more. So the client is on their 5th coaching session and has been having significant stress and sleep challenges stemming from an ongoing need to have a challenging conversation with their partner. And they express they need to plan for it and want to focus on that together to help reduce stress. What is the most helpful question to support the client in setting their goals for this conversation? I'm gonna put the answers up there so you guys can take a peek at them. And notice there's more than one reasonable response, but we're looking for the most helpful to support goal setting. That's a very specific question. So we really want to hone in on that as we're looking at the answers. Give me a second to read them. So we can start whittling these down. A, assumes that the client wants accountability from the coach. There's a huge assumption there, right? It doesn't say anywhere in there that they're looking for accountability. So we want to cross that one out. Remember, be careful about assumptions. And then we can rule out C, because C is coaching curiosity and problem solving. It's not asking, the client their needs. It's somewhat leading, because we're leading them into the problem being that partner's response. D also makes assumptions on how the client wants to solve the challenge. They never said that that they want to make that list. We're setting that for them. So that's coach driven. We can cross that one off. And we can also cross off E, because this one also makes assumptions on why that conversation is challenging. It never says that they're anticipating their partner having a defensive reaction. It could be so many other things that they're concerned about with the challenging conversation. It could be they're afraid of hurting their partner. They have a concern about how the relationship may change afterwards. It could affect other family members or friendships. All these things we don't really know. So E makes a big assumption about what that is. So if we rule out all of those with the assumptions, then we're left to know that the answer is B. How will you gauge success between now and the next coaching session? And that is specific to them setting their goals, right? Because we need it to be measurable. So that helps us kind of whittle that down. I hope those were helpful to you guys to kind of see how to put some of that into practice. And of course, as we wrap up the presentation, I wish you all of the success in your exam. I know you're going to do great. I also want to personally extend an invitation to you to join our coaching community. We have a ton of helpful resources available to help you manage your coaching practice. That's everything from that dynamic practice management platform that has coaches resources, library folders, tools, continuing education courses that we do really regularly, and all of that's available at no cost to our coaching community. We're really passionate about the health coaching revolution and really excited to have much more NBC-HWCs in our community. And we would be thrilled to have you alongside us on the platform. There's no cost to join, and you can access it through the App Store, Google Play, or any web browser at YourCoach.health. Also, because we're excited to have you taking the exam and want to congratulate you on that, and also an early congratulations on passing it, because I know you're going to do wonderfully. We're going to offer you a free 6 months on the platform as a congrats. You can use the code invited by Ash, which Rebecca just dropped into the chat. And you can use that when you're signing up for the platform, and that gives you a free 6 months to use as you start to build your practice. Now, as always, if you get in here, you have questions about some of the content we covered today, you have questions about your practice that you want to do, you just want to connect and say hi, you can easily reach me on the platform. So feel free, reach out, say hello. I would love to connect with you. Good luck on your exam, and I will see you on the platform soon. I'm going to hang around for just a minute in case anybody has any questions. I'm scrolling back through just to see. I see someone asked about if the test was done on a computer. If you get a piece of paper to write notes, you do get a whiteboard. So you'll have that you can write on. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, and questions about the appointment, I would definitely reach out to Prometric. They would be the best one, or the board for that. So yeah, great. And I don't see any more unanswered questions in the Q&A. So I think we are good, but if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on the platform. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for attending.